Hello, YouTubers. Alaska Prepper here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have an awesome guest today. And although she's been on the show a few times, I love having her on because her knowledge is beyond this world. She knows everything about everything when it comes to finance. She's been part of the game for decades. And let me stop talking because you all know that I get excited and I'll talk for an hour. All right. So let me introduce to you all Miss Lynette Zang. Hello, Ms. Lynette Zang. How are you doing today? Very nice to have you, and I'm very excited.
Well, I'm happy to be here, Rudy. Thank you so much for having me and that incredible introduction.
Well, Ms. Lynette Zang, I've been following you forever, and I am so glad, I am so happy that you did the video on your new channel on why you and ITM separated. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to cover that here, but there is a video on Ms. Zang's YouTube channel, and I will be leaving the link to everything, all right, on a description of this video and also on a pinned comment so you can find it easy. But there's a video on there where she explains everything. So if you're interested in that, make sure you visit her channel, subscribe, check the video out along with all her other informative videos that she has on the economy, on the state of finances, not only in the US, but around the world. So Ms. Zang, I'm just going to go ahead and get started because I know you're busy with your new company and all. So, and I actually have my notes on a phone, ladies and gentlemen. I was telling Ms. Zhang, I hope you don't mind because I'm senile. Now, everyone that's been following me for a while, they know I'm senile. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you some questions that I have here that I think are very important for our viewers to know because it's going to allow them to, number one, wake up to the fact that everything is not all right, and also wake up to the fact of what it is that they can actually still do in order to protect themselves for what's coming down the road. What is your opinion about the state of the United States economy and its finances? And what do you think about the middle class and the poorer class as well? I do remember reading something that we've just hit a consumer debt of about $17.7 trillion. And I mean, do you think that we can get out of this?
The only way out of it is to hyperinflate the currency out of it so that all of this debt gets repaid with currencies that have absolutely no value. But when look, I've studied currency life cycles, as you know, Rudy, since 1987. And there are repeatable patterns that we see every single time. And as I look at where we are, and it's not just the US, this is really a global issue. But when I look at where we are in terms of debt levels and then all of those patterns, because people need to understand that in the current system, debt is what creates money. People borrow money into existence. But when it gets to a point where this money is not repayable, and what has happened, not only has it not been repayable, but interest rates have risen enormously, and all of this debt keeps rolling over. I mean, you've got a problem, and it's that increase in interest rate that has actually already popped the debt bubble. And with this wall of debt, this isn't something that's going to happen, Rudy. I wish I could sit here and say that this is something in the future, but the reality is that debt bubble has already been popped. We are just the public, meaning the public is just not fully aware of that yet. But when you also hear, I mean, one of the things that has me really nervous as to the timing of everything is the decoupling of the synchronization of central bankers. And what I mean by that is since 2008, we've been experiencing a coordinated central bank move. Of course, the Swiss surprise in 2015 means that that trust between central bankers to do what they say they're going to do, well, that has been broken. The Federal Reserve kept saying that they were going to raise interest rates a half a basis point, a half a basis point, a half a basis point, and then they did 3/4 of a basis point. So you have some factors that are happening today that have me very nervous. Number one, you have inflation that's proving sticky. Well, that's not a big surprise. We're at the end of the system, and there's only one way to fight deflation, which is market implosion, and that's with inflation. So much as the central banks have been talking about a tight market, it's garbage. If you look on the Federal Reserve Education Department's website, what you'll see is that financial conditions have continued to be loose regardless of the increase in interest rates and regardless of the Fed selling off assets from their balance sheet and all of that. So it's not really a surprise that inflation is proving sticky. But what we are seeing in the advanced economies is the Swiss central bank lowered interest rates. The Federal Reserve has held interest rates, right? You're watching at the ECB. Well, now there's a relief because after all, inflation didn't come in as hot. I guess they managed to manipulate those numbers enough to make it look better than it is, because that's what they do. They don't change behavior. They just change how they account for it. And they say that's giving some consumers a relief. You need to understand that, everybody needs to understand that all the central bankers are really doing is moderating the rate and the speed of the inflation with interest rates. They aren't controlling it, and they aren't going to, prices aren't going to back off. Some that were extremely overvalued because of market trading, those may pull back. But, you know, much as the inflation has gone down, have your prices gone down? When you go to the food store or the gas pump or medical or insurance, oh my God, or anything that you're doing.
Now, one of the things you just said is something that I've always said, is that inflation will never go down. It will always go up. It's just at what rate will it go up? And the prices will never go back down to where they were. What I explained, the time that we're going through right now, right? Because right now I think people are starting to think, well, wait a minute. Inflation has kind of like leveled off. We've plateaued. It's not terrible like it was a year or two ago at 9, 10, which is understated in my opinion. They're like, okay, we're starting to get used to the new reality, right? They're starting to get used to it. And I tell them, you better not get used to it for too long, because we've got another round of inflation coming, and it's going to be worse than the last one. So this is the time, this is the time, in my opinion, that people need to take to prepare as best as possible.
You know, because we are running out of time. And, you know, in 2008, I knew that the system died. I was getting ready to retire, to be honest with you. You know, I was in a little 2-bedroom condo that I could just lock and go off and do my thing. And then 2008 happened, which I did not think I was going to see in our lifetime. And that's when I started, aside from the gold and silver, which I'd been prepping for a long time, that's when I shifted over and I bought a property in Central Phoenix, really because I knew my daughters, that's where my daughters are, is in Phoenix, so I'm not leaving them. And I became an urban farmer because food becomes the single biggest issue for people as we go through these reset transitions. But I started that in 2010. We don't have that luxury of time. And so what I've come to realize is, you know, my mantra: food, water, energy, security, barterability, which for me is mostly silver, but any talent you have, and this is critically important, so we should talk about that more. But food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. Community has risen to the tippy top because we have to come together locally so that we can sustain a reasonable standard of living, and everybody bring the gifts that they've been given. I mean, whether that's skills or talents, whether it's silver and gold, whether it's land, whether it's, you know, whatever it is that you have, now is the time to come together locally and share those gifts and build that community, because we don't have the luxury of time that I've had since 2010. But Rudy, we also have to do this globally because regardless of the fact that there have been failed attempts at introducing central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and the public in many areas are going, no, I mean, they'll take it when you give it to them, but they won't reload it. They are still forcing that down our throats. If we come together globally in a peaceful movement, and so easy to do, you just position your fiat money into sound money, gold and silver, we could have a chance at having a seat at the table in this new system. And we have to have that seat at the table. People can't afford food. They can't afford shelter. They can't afford the basic necessities of life because the inflation has eroded the purchasing power of the dollar and all other currencies. And all they have is this. And every time they do that, the value of what's out there goes down. So, you know, I mean, I definitely want to talk and show people the importance of community wherever you are, locally and globally, so we can become our own central bankers. Because do you really trust them? Their job is not to take care of you and me. Their job is to take care of themselves and the banking system and the government. And we have to not just survive this, but wealth never disappears. It just shifts location. How about this time we have the wealth shift to the public instead of the 1%ers? What a concept. And we can do that because this stuff is so severely undervalued.
Imagine that. Ms. Zang, for those people that are watching, for the viewers that are watching right now, you now understand why I love having Ms. Zang on as much as I do. Because Ms. Zang, almost every single thing that you said, I've said in different ways. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more than, you know, what I agree with you as far as everything that you just said, as far as community, as far as real money, as far as having assets. You know, this is something that I've always told the people, those that care to watch my videos, and that is that as long as there is a fiat currency system in place, the government, they will always have the power. And as long, and if there is a stable and sound money system in place, i.e. Gold and silver, it is we the people that have the power, because we will then actually have a voice. Because when you restrict the government as to what they can spend your labor on, you have the power. You the people have the power, not the government. And as you said, if we shift away from that fiat currency system and get into sound money, we will have the power. I hope that that's a message that people can take away from this video.
I hope so too, Rudy. I mean, it's the most important message, because really, if you think back, the Constitution puts the individual at the top of the list. And then the states are supposed to support the rights of the individual, and the federal government's supposed to support the rights of the state that's supposed to support the rights of the individual. And that whole thing has been flip-flopped. As long as we could convert out of this stuff into this stuff, we the public could make our voices heard. And so I'm watching Zimbabwe very, very closely, because they're the first country that are really attempting to do, well, a gold-backed and even a gold-backed CBDC. But here's the problem with it. It is not convertible into the gold.
Oh, really? Wow. That's not good. I was thinking that it was.
No,
but,
it's not.
That's not good. Yeah.
No, I mean, look at what they did. First, about a year and a half or 2 years ago, whenever that was, they minted a 1 ounce gold coin. So to protect people's purchasing power. Well, who could afford that? Just the elites at this point, right? So then they did a gold-backed CBDC, and the public didn't trust it because you can't convert it. And I stress that so much. And I'll tell you why in a second. So that wasn't adopted. Now, the gold coins were adopted by those that could afford them, but the gold CBDC was not adopted. Now they've come out with, this is the 6th iteration of their Zimbabwe dollar, the ZIG, that is a combination of a basket of currencies and a component of gold. But again, they make it so hard. What is that basket? What is the percentage? But it is not convertible. So governments always, this is one of those repeatable patterns that has happened well over 4,800 times, where governments, once all confidence is lost in the currency and in the system and those in power, they bring in gold to regain that confidence. But I'm telling you, unless it is convertible into the physical at some level, it's not over yet. They still have to hyperinflate away that debt, and there's no way for us, the public, to really know what's going on in their opaque books or their fictional books.
Right. And I can see how they can get away with doing a CBDC. Now, I'm of the thought of the government actually, at least in the United States, because I see now that the Orange Man Bad said there will be no government issued CBDC. And I see that states governors are also turning into, hey, we will not honor a federal CBDC. But Ms. Zang, this is what I think. And this is not my original thought. I believe I got it from Mr. Martin Armstrong. And that is that the banks, how we are having a lot of bank failures and they're being gobbled up by the bigger banks. Once we have all of the banks in the U.S. consolidated, and there's only a few mega banks, they will in turn, as privately owned businesses, say, well, we're not going to accept cash anymore. We're going to have a CBDC, or not a CBDC. We're going to have a digital currency that's controlled by the bank, but then it will be the government that controls those banks, i.e. programmable money, shutting it off if you're not politically in line with their ideology, etc., etc. And or that the government comes out after a major crisis, because there has to be a major crisis for the American people to agree to this, right? So I mean, I'm always touting that 70% or so, 73% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and about 40% of Americans that earn six figures or more live paycheck to paycheck. So we're only one major crisis away from the government saying, hey, we know that you're hurting right now, but if you let us do this, CBDC, we will take away the pain. And we're going to back it up by gold, because we have 8,254 tons of gold, so they say, in reserve. So we're going to back it up by gold, and the people are going to be like, it's a win-win. It is a win-win. We got free money, and it's going to be backed up by gold. How can that be wrong? But then things at first will be great. Things will work fantastic. People will be like, oh, yes, thank goodness that we did this. But then comes the programmability. And that's the two ways that I can see it going. But I'm more interested in hearing what's your thought of what will the end game be once this fiat currency system that we're under finally goes away.
Well, I have to say, everything you just said, I 100% agree with, which is why that global community is so critically important. If we can just get even 3% of the population into physical gold and silver and pull it out of the system, then we can have a seat at the table. And that's why that's so critical, because really, what's the World Economic Forum? You will own nothing. I don't think you're going to be happy if you own nothing, because you're going to have to rent absolutely everything. And what they're pushing for and what they've been pushing for, God, I've been talking about this since 2015, is tokenizing every single asset that you have so that you can carry it around, all your equity, on the phone. And then what have they done? They've gotten everybody to think short term. Yep. Hey, if that didn't happen 15 seconds ago, it doesn't matter. It does matter. It matters a lot. So what they'll end up doing is allowing people, or encouraging people is a better way to say it, or manipulating people is probably the best way to say it, into spending all of your equity. And then who do you blame? They're not going to come in and take the cash, because if they came in and eliminated cash, then you'd know that something was different. Rather, they're going to put a chip in the cash that mirrors the interest rates, or the, should I say, the negative interest rate. Because once you got all the purchasing power, you got to take the principal. There's no purchasing power left. So they attack your principal. They get you to spend your equity. You don't blame anybody, even though, I mean, you know, you talked about the middle class, and my sister used to own a toy store. She was the middle class, the mom and pop shop. They allowed Amazon to come in and Amazon didn't have to make a profit for what, 10 years, 12 years, 15, something like that. And they didn't have to charge state sales tax. Well, mom and pops have to make a profit in order to stay in business, and they have to charge sales tax because they're going to have to pay it. And so what happened over time was all of those middlemen, the middle class, well, they all work for Amazon now, don't they?
Yep.
It's like,
incredible.
And then they changed the laws after they got what they wanted, which was a reduction in the middle class. And the same kind of thing has happened through what we've recently been going through in the, you know, in 2020, the pandemic. You know, I mean, there was a lot of middle class mom and pop shops that could not survive that because they were forced to close their doors.
Right.
That was a test.
That was a test, and we failed. The American people failed that test, unfortunately. But hopefully we learn from it. Hopefully we learn from it, and it won't happen again. So I mean, that's you know, we'll see about that, right?
What I learned from it was that even though I have all of this food, and I've been prepping for so long, I had plenty of toilet paper and everything else that I needed. There were riots near my house at the Capitol and near my children's house in Scottsdale. Nice area, right? And I realized that what we really needed to do was, you know, a bug out, someplace where you could go. And if you can't leave, you got to do that inside a community. And there is strength in numbers. So hopefully that won't happen again. But you brought up Australia. They were even more stringent with their shutdowns, lockdowns, and putting people in segregated camps and horrible things. And I love Australia. I found my voice there last August when I was speaking and realized that what I really needed to be talking about mostly is community, to facilitate that community piece. And to your point, now they are slowly tightening that noose by getting rid of cash and making it seem like, you know, it's voluntary, and biometrics, putting in biometrics to track the whole population. It's a test. It's always a test. How much can they get away with? Yep. China's actually the place that gives me the most hope. And I think you and I have talked about the fact that, you know, China, the whole world is watching China and how they're controlling the population. But that seems to be reversing, because when they turned the screws just a little tighter in the lockdown, the public in China revolted.
That's great.
And they're also doing some quiet revolts. Like they had the one-child rule. Well, now they need people to have a lot more babies to support the economy. And the public is just not having it because they see the cost of raising a child is ridiculous. They can't afford it. And so that's a quiet revolution, which is what I'm recommending, a peaceful, quiet revolution where, you know, they just say no. And that's what I'm saying. Just say no to this stuff. Just
Absolutely. The better prepared you are, the better that you can use your no muscle. So, and it's not just prepared as far as having food, you know, or medicine or self-defense. It's also prepared and having a way to interact in the economy. And that is what gold and silver is. You know, let me go on a little rant here real quick. But you've heard it 1,000 times, I'm sure. You can't eat gold and silver. Absolutely.
Right.
You can eat it. You can eat it. It's just not going to give you any nutritional benefit, right?
Right.
And but I do know from studying a little bit of recent history and past history, and that is that during the Great Depression, during 33, when FDR, which is supposed to be one of the best presidents that we've ever had, but I digress, when he tried to confiscate the people's gold, only about 1/4 of the people turned in their gold. And you know those other 3/4, because the Great Depression, I'm sure you know, was a deflationary depression, meaning there wasn't enough money floating around. Those people that kept their gold, they were able to eat, right? And that's almost 100 years back. But if you just take it a few years back to Venezuela, Venezuela probably today is trading gold and silver, little shavings or little pieces of jewelry of gold and silver in order to get haircuts, in order to eat, in order to take a taxi, etc., etc. So having it is a sure way of being able to, number one, preserve your wealth, i.e., and purchasing power, and being able to interact in the economy to be able to get those things that you did not have the forethought to prepare with.
I agree with that 100%. And that's why I pulled out this tray, because I had accumulated sterling silver.
Oh, nice. 925.
Yeah, exactly. Gold and silver in any form. It can be broken. It can be tarnished. It can be dented. It doesn't matter. It is monetary at its base. But the other thing that I really also wanted to bring up in there is, if you have any talent or any skill, I mean, barterable is finding a coincidence of wants. And that's why going to a pure barter system might be challenging if all you have are strawberries, for example, because they have a shelf life. Gold and silver, universally accepted, no shelf life, right? But coming together in community and bringing those talents and skills, I think this is a phenomenal time for people to be learning a new skill. I know how to lay irrigation because of the work I did on my urban farm. Do I particularly want to lay irrigation now?
At least no. You know. Yeah.
But I could. If I had to, I certainly could do it. I know how to do it. So they need to prepare themselves with gold and silver in any form. It's just that the coins are the most easily recognizable, and it's all already broken down. Like, these are just 2 silver dimes, which are 90% pure. It is easier to put 2 dimes together than to break a quarter in half.
Right.
If you had been paid in ounces of gold back in 1971, when, according to the BLS, the average wage was $10,290 or something like that. Okay, at $35 an ounce, you would have been paid 294 ounces of gold
in 1 year. Yeah, that's 600 grand.
I know, isn't that amazing? It gets better. It gets better. The other day, I pulled the spot market, which is severely undervalued to gold's true value. But if the average wage was almost $64,000 a year. So on the surface, this is the nominal confusion part. And the inflation part, you go, well, I'd much rather have $64,000 a year than $10,000 a year. Except in 1971, a family of 4 could live with 1 wage earner. Today, you need 2 wage earners earning the same, that average salary is 64 grand a year. And to your point earlier, they're paycheck to paycheck. But if they had not gotten a raise but were paid in the same number of ounces of gold, that was almost $700,000. It was like $698,000 in change a year.
And it goes back to the point I was trying to make, that what inflation steals from you is not necessarily the nominal amount of money, but it's your time. Because now, like you said, back in the 70s, 1 job, 1 person, 40 hours a week could get a house, sustain a family, send their kids to college, have a nice vehicle, go on vacation at least once a year. Today, it takes 2 salaries to just keep your head above water. So what are they doing? They're making you work twice as much for 1/4 of what you used to get for the same amount of time. Incredible.
Exactly. That was the original plan. when they were creating it, governments wanted to tax you without going through legislation so you didn't know it. Inflation solves that. There's that invisible inflation
Yep.
tax from the new money that's printed by the time it trickles down to you.
Yep.
Corporations wanted to pay people less to work, but hey, if you're used to getting $10, you're not going to accept 5. But if you can make that $10 spend like 5,
Right.
well, wow, what have we seen since the central banks were in control back in the 70s and particularly the 80s? Up until that point, productivity rose with the worker. After that point, boy, you have a real big shift, and that's what's enabled the income and wealth inequality.
Right. Exactly. And
Disgusting.
it's funny that we're talking about this now, because I put this out a day or two ago, and it was a quote, and I'll paraphrase it, but I'm sure you probably know it verbatim. It was a quote from Maynard Keynes, right? The father of Keynesian economics. Thank you, Mr. Keynes, right? And
Thank
he
you.
said that the best way that a government can steal from its people their wealth without anybody knowing is through inflation. And the problem is, Ms. Zang, is that number one, that's true 100%. But the main problem is that quote is not taught or discussed in public
Right.
education.
Shocking.
Incredible, isn't it? But I always have this argument with people, with my viewers, with some of my viewers, is that this was all planned. Just like you said, look at it. This is Maynard Keynes was back in the early 20s, in the teens.
Documents.
Yeah, this was all planned. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that they were going to be gone from this earth before the final end game that we are approaching today. They were going to be gone already, so they didn't care.
I'm sorry, but I think we're already in it.
Yes, we are. I agree.
I'm looking at the monetary velocity chart, which is how quickly money changes hands.
It's the lowest it's ever been, right?
Oh, no. It was the worst it was ever been. Now there is a pervasive spike up, which means that when they get their hands on money, they are transferring it out, which is exactly what happens during hyperinflation. And what I've been watching it for is as an indication of when the hyperinflation has actually begun before anybody else really sees it. So you're right. It was at the lowest, lower than it was during the Depression in 33. It was at the lowest level ever, which means that all of that new debt that's been created, because it peaked in 97, all of that new debt that's been created, all of the money printing that's been created was not actually stimulating the economy. It was stimulating the inflation. It was stimulating the robbing.
So, first of all, the velocity of money is how often, let's say, a dollar bill is exchanged hand to hand. So the more, the better for the government, right? And it because more taxation, but the more it seems that it's better for the economy because there's more economic activity. So the velocity of money was very, very low, the lowest it's ever been. But what you're saying is this: I haven't looked at the velocity of money chart from the Fed in a while. So what you're saying is that it's taken a quick dip upward, inverse of where it was going before. And that means that people are now starting to try to get all of that fiat currency that they had stored up somewhere and put it into assets, meaning that assets are going to start going up very rapidly now. Asset prices.
Right. And,
right?
and they're trying to protect themselves because, the difference between slow inflation and fast inflation and higher inflation, it's all inflation. It's just a matter of the speed of that inflation. At 2%, they're getting what they want, right? They're taking away your purchasing power, but you don't make any different choices. That is what central banks refer to as price stability. Not that gallon of milk remaining the same, which is how you and I would interpret it, but that you and I, even though the price of that milk is going up, it's going up so slowly that we don't notice and we still buy the milk. The problem where we are right now, Rudy, is that the inflation for them, the fast inflation has made it noticeable, right? Especially at the food stores, because people have to eat and they go in there once or twice a week and they see the prices of what they buy going up and up and up, and their baskets, what they can buy because of their income, going down and down and down. I mean, we're already seeing that when you've got people that can't afford. I mean, it's just horrible that you find people that cannot afford to feed their children. That kills me.
I don't know. Whenever I go into a supermarket, which I don't do very often, I usually like to bulk shop at Costco mainly. But whenever I go into a regular supermarket like Safeway or Fred Meyer, Walmart, etc., I look at the prices and I cannot believe how an average person making 60 grand a year in a family household, or 64, whatever it may be, how they can survive. I mean, there's one thing that I've been tracking consistently for like the last 3.5, 4 years. And that is, I'm not sure if you go to Costco or have a Costco near you, Miss Zang.
I grow my food.
You go to where?
I grow my food.
Oh, you grow your food. But, well, there's this oil, an olive oil that I was getting at Costco ever since it opened here. And when Costco opened here about 3.5 years ago or so, it's a 3-liter bottle of oil that comes in a pack of 2. When they first opened, that pack of 2 was $19.99. And today, well, the last time I was there, I haven't been there in a couple of weeks or so, $67.
Oh my God. Yeah.
For the exact same product, the exact same weight.
And that's well, at least it's the exact same weight, because
yes, it
we've
is.
all got inflation going on.
Right.
But you see now, if it just went up like 2% and you weren't tracking it, you wouldn't realize it.
Or you wouldn't mind. You would be like, oh, it's $20.30. Who cares? That's no big deal, right? You would just say no big deal. But $67, goodness gracious, huh?
Let me tell you, it's challenging. And I also, I'll give them a plug because I like them. But Azure Farms, I do buy the lawn storage stuff. So my olive oil. Although we are going to be pressing our own moringa seed oil. Yeah, the goal is to be 100% self-sufficient and independent. And the best way to do that is with community, because I don't think one person can pull all the pieces together.
Right.
And I'd like to point out that depending upon your circumstances, I mean, all I have here is a little half acre. Now, my bug out location, I have lots of space, and so we're planting and we're doing lots of things up there. But you don't really need a whole lot of space in order to create fresh food. If you have a patio, you can create that on just a normal average shelving unit. You put a 10-gallon tank of fish underneath to create the fertilizer. You run a line up to the top. You have it slanted a little bit, and you can create lettuce, tomatoes, strawberries. You can create some fresh food. If you don't even have that amount of space, get some sprouting seeds. Broccoli is the most nutritious one. Throw them in the freezer. You rinse them off for 3 days in a row, and guess what? You've got some fresh, highly nutritious food to eat. So depending upon your circumstance, you can always create food. If I have somebody that volunteers on the property here, guess what they go home with? Guess what everybody that works together in the property every Monday, Morgan, the farm manager, sends out a list of what is ripe, and everybody goes home with eggs or beets or lettuce or, whatever.
Awesome.
I'm going to tell you, my peaches are just coming in, and I'm a little greedy with those.
That's okay. They're yours.
I'm not going to lie.
Well, I'm not as advanced as you are, Ms. Zang, but I do have a few chickens, which I am very happy with. And one thing that I've learned about chickens is that they are nasty little animals. Okay, they really are.
No.
And they're not very empathetic towards each other. But it's funny because on my way to the bunker here this morning, my chickens had two chicks on their own. I didn't have to incubate or nothing, but they had two chicks on their own, and I have them out there in their own little spots, separated from the herd. That way, they don't get picked on. But yeah, having things like that is very, very important. But again, remember those that maybe are not in a socioeconomic status where they can afford things like that. You can survive a crisis with minimal preparations, and just do what you can do. Do the best that you can do with what you have. Like Miss Zhang said, skills are very important because they're very barterable and they'll get you out of a situation. And Ms. Zhang, check this out. I put out a video a while back, I don't know, a week or two ago. I had preserved a packet of ramen noodles for 13 years. And it was still good. So I tell people you can put away food for a very long time. It just depends on how you package it and how you store it, how long it will last. So yeah, 13 years. I was so excited about eating that ramen that was 13 years old. And I was even more excited when I found out that it was good. I really thought it was going to be rancid and really bad. But man, I'll tell you what, it was actually good.
Well, I'm a little nervous about the chemicals that they put in.
Oh no, terrible for you. Yeah, that stuff is terrible for you. But I had to do it. I did it so that my viewers didn't have to. Ms. Zhang, what?
I love how you volunteer yourself for the experiment. That's
well,
great.
that kind of stuff is fun for me. I have fun doing that kind of stuff. I have so many experiments going on, on my little piece of property here. I have some freeze-dried food that I purchased a couple of years ago, and I stuck inside a tent that in the summertime, with the heat of the sun, gets up to about 100 degrees inside, and in the winter it's like -45. So I've left that food in there for going on 3 years now, and I've tested a can every year to see how that food will do out in the elements without being stored in a temperature controlled room. And so far, I'm very happy to say that both years it was good. But I'll stretch that excuse me, I'm sorry. I'll stretch that experiment out to about 10 years. So if I'm still doing YouTube in 10 years, you'll see me eating 10-year-old food that's been left out in the sun. I believe that people that don't have their preparations in order shouldn't be purchasing precious metals unless they're prepared, because like we said earlier, you can't eat gold and silver. And during a crisis, like you said, food, shelter, water, medicine, security, all that kind of stuff is life preserving, right? So you want to make sure that you preserve life first. So any excess wealth that people may have, what percentage of that would you not recommend, but would you yourself say is the appropriate amount to put into precious metals for wealth preservation? And what percentage do you believe should be left out in fiat? Because after any big crisis, we will still need fiat for a little bit, won't we?
But depending upon your age, and if you're still working, you might need about 3 months worth of cash outside of the system, because you can always make a deposit. You just can't always make a withdrawal. Of course, going into Australia, neither one of those are going to be you're not going to be able to do any of that soon there, at least at that one bank. But if you are retired and you are using your investments to generate income, you really are risking 100% of your principal. So that number should go up a lot. And as far as what percentage to fiat you should have in your precious metals portfolio, well, only keep in fiat what you're okay losing, honestly. Personally, because I've been studying this on some level since I was like 10 years old, I have a very high level of comfort. I am all in. The only fiat assets that I hold are some cash because I'm running a business and I got to have cash. But I personally am all in with food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, and then really community and shelter. If you don't have the means to buy gold and silver, and remember, gold and silver in any form, this is a sterling silver iced teaspoon, right? In any form is monetary at its base, But if you get involved with community, and if you don't know where, go to a farmer's market, right? Go to a community garden, there are meetup groups, find like-minded people and volunteer on their farm. I'm happy when somebody volunteers on this farm. I got news for you. There's always something to do, right? And become part of the community so that you can make sure that all of those needs are met.
What percentage of the insurable deposits in the United States?
There are more uninsured. If I remember correctly, obviously I don't have this in front of me, but just to support, if many banks go down at once, they have roughly a teeny bit over 1 penny for every insured deposit.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure they have more uninsured deposits than they do insured deposits. And what does that insurance mean anyway? It's garbage, right? It doesn't mean anything. What we've seen even recently with another bank failure, right? That they are not yet, being the central bankers and the government, are not yet ready for us, the public, to realize that our wealth will be bailed in. And there was a thing maybe a year ago of the committee at the FDIC laughing.
I covered that.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
About the fact that people are going to be bailed in, but they don't need to know about it, because then you make different choices, right?
Yeah.
Don't take money out of the system. Leave it there where it's vulnerable, because as we've seen in countries like Greece and Portugal and other places that have actually done the bail-in, Cyprus, you can hang on those doors all you want. They're not letting you in. You're not getting your wealth back. And we won't have any notice about it when they are ready for us to know this. They are not yet ready for us to know this. So that's why the recent bank also got bailed in, all the uninsured deposits, right? They don't want anybody to know that that's possible yet.
It's all going to happen at once, do you think, Ms. Zang? You think it'll be systemic?
Oh, I definitely think it'll be systemic. I mean, every single bank is way underwater. What? They've raised the interest rates, all that debt that they're holding. That's not just government bonds. That's mortgages. That's auto loans. That's student loans. That's revolving credit cards. It's all of that stuff, right? And whatever they locked in at the lower interest rate, right, at zero, when they've raised the rates to whatever it is, 5%, whatever, 4%, I mean, that's the market value of those assets. They have tank-a-rooskied.
They have a lot.
And there's a run on the bank and they're forced to liquidate. They're only going to get what the market will bear.
Right.
So, maybe we can't see it because they hide that stuff from us, but it's there. Every single bank, including the central banks, are all insolvent. They are insolvent.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it yourself. What you do about it is really up to you. We're going to go ahead and call it here, Ms. Zang, but before we leave, I want to make sure that our viewers know exactly where to find you and what you've got going on. I do believe that you started a new enterprise, and I would like you to go ahead and talk about it.
I have. We've started Zang Enterprises. And you can find all my work on YouTube at the Lynette Zang, and also the same address for Twitter. On Instagram and Facebook, it's at Lynette Zang. And if you want to come to our website, which just went live on Tuesday, that is LynetteZang.com. And what we like to do is we like to support every area of the mantra. And we're definitely working on that. And there'll be lots of new things evolving. But we are actually executing my original strategy. I've been studying currency life cycles since '87, and those repeatable patterns. Once you learn how to identify those, then you know where you are in the currency's life cycle, and therefore, what is the next most likely outcome? Because they want you to think that this time is different. Not different. We can make it different by creating a silent revolution and saying no to their inflation.
Absolutely.
You just do it by converting your fiat money, your government debt-based money, into sound money.
I've been saying this for years, Ms. Zhang, and I've been telling people if everyone in the United States that has a job, if every time they got paid, they went and bought 1 ounce of silver, this would have been over a long time ago.
Absolutely.
But anyways, we'll go ahead and leave it there. Ms. Zhang, as always, I want to say thank you very much for joining in, because this was a very big treat for me. And I'm sure that my viewers, as soon as I edit this and put it up, will be a big treat for them. And also, I will be leaving all of the links for everything that has to do with Ms. Zhang on the description of the video, and also on a pinned comment so that you can find it very easily. Go check out all her links. Go to her YouTube channel, which is not very old, and you're already up to what, 35,000 subscribers, Ms. Zhang? Nice.
Yeah, we started actually on February 16th was the very first video that we put out.
That is awesome. So go to her YouTube channel, make sure you click subscribe, click the bell, because Ms. Zhang, every video that she puts out is a good video. It's not like me, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Zhang is not like, every video that she puts out is a great video, so go check it out. And having said that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining in. God bless every one of you. God bless America. I'm Alaska Prepper and Ms. Zhang, and we are out. God bless. All right, Ms. Zhang, that was an awesome